and welcome. I'm Lauren, and in today's video I'll be demonstrating how I color grass in adult coloring books. I'll be going over some examples and demonstrating different techniques. So let's get started. To begin with, let me show you some examples of the method that I'll be demonstrating. So first of all, in Animaux de la Forêt by Carolyn Allen, we have this page, the macaques, and let me zoom in a bit. So you can see how I've colored the grass with long strokes and then used acrylic pen to make wildflower-like dots. Okay, so that's one example. Okay, another one is this page by Teresa Goodridge in Country Kitchen Charm. Okay, and again, long strokes and then flowers with acrylic pen. Okay, another one from Romantic Country by Erie. Okay, so here it's slightly shorter strokes, and again, I added in acrylic pen for flowers. And finally, we have the hamster page from Fragile World by Kirby Rosannes, and again, we've got some long strokes, some short strokes, some flowers, and of course the added acrylic wildflower embellishment. Okay, so those are some examples. And now I'm going to talk about the current page that I'm working on and show you how to color this specific image. Okay, so the page that I'm working on is from Dragon Spell by Joseph Kattenbang, and let's zoom in again. This is the grass that I've colored, okay, using the technique that I'm going to show you. So the process is fairly simple, and it's just a matter of having patience to do all the layering. So I start off with a base color. So there are a couple of possibilities that you could do. You could either use an alcohol marker. I use this no-name brand that I got from a art store, and basically you just put down a layer of your lightest color. Another option is to use a watercolor pencil. Okay, so this is a Mondeluz from Kohinoor, and it's the lightest color that I found in this brand. You could also use Inktense, again, the lightest color. And then once you've laid down the pencil, then you just use a water brush and you I've lost the word. It's gone right out of my head. Anyway, you just use a water brush and you activate, that's the word I was looking for, and you activate the pencil or the Inktense, and then you wait for it to dry. It doesn't take very long for it to dry. Okay, and then you use pencils on top. So I'm using Castle Arts 120 pencils. Make sure that you have a very, very sharp point on the pencil, and I use a Dahl 133 sharpener. It gets a really, really sharp point. Okay, I use 4 different shades. So you need a light tone, 2 mid-tones, and a dark tone. So I'm using 112, 055, 053, and 054. So 112 is the light tone, 055 and 053 are midtones, even though 053 is slightly darker than 055, and 054 for my dark tone. Okay, then I use any brand of watercolor marker. This one is I think it's called a Giorgiano, yes, and you can either use the fine tip, okay, or you can use the brush tip. Okay, and you will need some sort of Q-tip or cotton bud for smudging. And then finally, some acrylic pens. So for this page, I'm using a red, an orange, and a muted green. Okay, I use the Artristo brand or the Tuli Art brand. Okay, so let me move on. Yes, and I have made a photocopy of the page, yes, that we are going to be working on. Let me just zoom in. Okay, so you start off with your base layer. So I'm going to do this with the alcohol marker, okay, simply because it dries more quickly. So let's make sure we're zoomed in to a section of the page. Let's do the top here. Okay, so you just lay down your alcohol marker over everything. Okay, now keep in mind that alcohol markers dry very quickly, okay? And they also dry lighter than what you put down on the page. Only the grass. Make sure that you don't color over any of the other sections, okay? Because you don't want other parts of the page to be green. Okay, right. I'll also do some with the watercolor pencil. Okay, so let's do this section with watercolor so that you can see the difference. Okay, so I just put down the watercolor pencil again over the entire area of grass. Okay, this pencil doesn't have to be that sharp. All right, because you're going to be activating it. Okay. Right, and now we will activate it with the water. Okay, again, don't worry so much about lines, or even though watercolor pencils usually activate quite smoothly. So, okay, and as I said, for this part, if you use a watercolor pencil, make sure that it is completely dry before you add any pencil on top. Okay. Right, so here we have, let me zoom out a bit. We have two sections, one section with alcohol marker and one section with watercolor pencil. We're going to now work on the alcohol marker section while we wait for the watercolor section to dry. Okay, so we start off by taking our mid-tone. Okay, we're actually going to start with the mid-tone pencil, which for me is 055. You can use any brand of pencil. It doesn't matter. Just make sure that you have a very sharp point. Okay, and now we're going to start coloring over the alcohol marker, Yes, and we're going to use the guidelines that the artist has given us. So for example, here in this corner here, we have the blades of grass, and we're going to put our pencil in the shadow. Okay, so these blades of grass are going to cast a shadow up here, but we also want to make sure to leave a highlight here at the top of the guidelines in the blades of grass above. Okay. So we just go, and you can use flicking motions or circular motions. It doesn't matter, okay? If you want more distinct blades of grass, you can use the flicking motions, okay? And here at the top, we just go right up to the edge, okay? Notice that I'm leaving highlights, okay? Make sure to leave them in. Okay, and in larger areas, use flicking motions. And in smaller areas, you can just use a scribble motion or a flicking motion. And here next to the rock, yes, make sure to get close up to the rock and around the flower. Okay, and here too. Okay, flicking motions. You can even go into the leaf a little bit, but always leave a highlight. So there we go. We've got our first layer down. Zoom out a bit. And you can see we've got our shadow areas and we've left a highlight. Okay, now we go on to our next color. Excuse the noise outside. It's some children from the school. Okay, we're going on to our next color, which is also the mid-tone, but slightly darker, 053. And again, we are going to go only into the shadow areas. Now, we don't want to go too much into the color that we've already put down. So just go really closely to the edge and flick into the color that you've already put down. Okay, you don't have to cover as much of the page. Okay, you want to leave some of the color that you've already put down. Okay, but definitely go into the shadow areas closer to where the other items are putting cast shadow onto the page. Okay, and so here we can also do some there, some here. Okay, maybe let me zoom in a bit. Okay, and you can see that the marker has put some texture onto the page as well, which will also give texture to the grass. So with flicking motions, you just put in the blades of grass. Okay, make sure to leave your highlight. Okay, it actually goes quick once you get into the rhythm of it. Okay, now I'm going to go for my darkest color, which is 054. Okay, and again, only in the shadow areas. Okay, and again, flick. So I'm only putting it now in the shadow areas. And just a little bit, you don't have to put too much. And then just make sure you're leaving your highlight, as I said. Okay, right, and you can already start to see that you're getting blades of grass. Okay, so now that we have done that, we're going into our lightest color, 112, and here you're going to go a little bit into the highlighted areas, but not too much. Okay, and you can ignore the shadow areas because you don't want to lighten up those shadow areas. So just flicking motions into the highlighted areas, skipping over the shadow areas. Yeah, here at the bottom. Okay, so let's zoom out. So now you can see that you've got kind of thick foliage. So if we compare it to this side, yes, where we don't have anything, okay, here you can see you've got blades of grass in 3 different shades. You've got your shadow areas, and you've got your highlight areas, and you've got your midtones. Let's put a bit more flicks there. Okay, right, now we want to deepen up the shadow areas even more, and for this we're going to use the watercolor marker. Now, as I said, you can either use the fine tip or the brush tip. It all depends on how thick you want your lines. I am actually using my brush tip because I want my blades to be a bit thicker. Now, you have to be careful because with a brush tip, if you press very hard, you're going to get a very thick line, and we don't want our lines to be too thick. So make sure that you are using only the very tip of the brush, okay? And again, you flick. Now, with this section, you're going to have to work kind of quickly because you don't want the marker to dry too quickly, because then you're going to get harsh lines. So you put down a few strokes and then you use the Q-tip to smudge them out. Okay, so for example, and it's only in the highlights. And you can make sure that you are using light pressure, and you can vary your strokes, and then you smudge them out. Okay, if you want the lines to come back in a bit more, you can go over. Okay, and here, just strokes in the highlighted area, in the shadow area, sorry. And then you use your Q-tip and you smudge. You will still get the shadow of the line, but it will look smudged out. Okay, and again, smudge. And you can even go into darker shadow areas. Okay, let's go here. And you just make sure you're using the tip, very light pressure. Just let the pen do what it wants to do. Okay, don't get stressed if you have one thick line, one thin line. In nature, there is a lot of variety. So don't worry so much if you have some thick lines, some thin lines. Okay, so now let's have a look at what we have. All right, so again, now with this marker, we put in the really dark shadow areas. Okay, our next stage is to use the acrylic markers. Okay, so you can use whatever colors you like because of the color scheme that I have on my page. Let me just show you again. Okay, so I've chosen a particular color scheme for my page, and it's going to be reds and oranges. And so that is why I am using the red and orange acrylic pen. And you can see that I've just put lots of dots down. Okay, so let's go back. Okay, so the idea here is just to put the dots at random. Okay, now you want to cluster them together so that they look realistic. So for example, let's start off with our red. Let's just give it a shake. It's also a good idea to take a scrap piece of paper and just make sure that it's working. Okay, all right. Okay, and now we scroll into, now I usually put the dots into the shadow areas. Okay, oh, we're a bit out of focus there. Okay, so I just put dots at random. Okay, and here, cluster some of them together, and then put a couple of random ones. Okay, make sure to leave room for the other color. Okay, now we're going to use the orange again and give it a shake. Make sure it's working. Oops, where was it? There we go. Okay, make sure it's working. And you can even overlap some of the dots you already have, because in nature, flowers overlap each other. Or you can have one area where you only have orange. Okay, and basically you just put them in where you want. Random, cluster, a couple of single ones. Okay, and you can overlap even a couple of the colors. If you think they don't stand out enough, you can go back in. And then you get them layered up. You can even put a couple into the highlight areas. Okay, if you want. Okay, so now I'm just going to show you what I do with the final acrylic pen, and that is this muted green. Now, as you can see, some of these grass leaves, yes, cover over other parts of the page. So first of all, it's very important that you first color in that area. So for example, again, let me show you on my other completed page. Here, I colored in this background first, okay? And then only after this area was colored in did I go in with the green and make flicks, Okay, the reason that you do this is because you want the flicks to go over the area that you've already colored. Okay, so for example, here I haven't colored in these rocks, so I haven't yet put down the green acrylic marker. Okay, first I will color in the rock and then I will put the marker. Okay, but I'm just going to show you how that works once you have colored that element. So for example, here, right, we've got these blades of grass or leaves going onto the rock. So again, you just flick, okay, and you flick and it can go over the item. But again, make sure you have already colored it. Otherwise, if you put it down first and then color with pencil, the acrylic marker is going to be erased. Okay. All right, the process is exactly the same on whether you put down alcohol marker or watercolor pencil. So let's do this area for the watercolor pencil. Again, I take my lighter mid-tone, which is 055, very sharp point. Okay, and I just put down the layer. Okay, flicking into the shadow areas. Now here on the edges, you go with the direction of the line art. Okay, darker here next to the sword because it puts a cast shadow. Okay, darker next to the rock. You can even outline it a bit into the areas where the leaves are casting shadow. And of course, make sure to leave the highlight. Okay, whether you use alcohol marker or watercolor, you might get a slightly different look. It could happen, it might not happen. You could also, if you don't want to use alcohol marker or watercolor base, you can just use a pencil base. So for example, here, I can just put a light base of pencil. It will have the same effect. It will show more of the tooth of the paper though, so you might have to layer a bit more. So as you can see here, I've put down just pencil. I can see more of the white of the paper. And here I've got watercolor pencil and the white of the paper has been almost completely removed. Okay, so that's the difference between using a pencil base or a watercolor base or an alcohol base. The alcohol and the watercolor remove the white of the paper. Okay, let's go on to our next darkest color, which is 053, okay? And again, I just put it into the shadow areas flicking. And you can just put the flicks in the direction of the artwork or even opposing the direction of the artwork, because in nature, yes, grass does not grow in a uniform way. So you can put many different directions for the grass. And here, just on top of the pencil base, you're going to have more white in this area. Okay, here I'm flicking. Do a bit this way, a bit this way. Okay, here on the stone, I actually want them more to go that way, but I can have a random one doing something else. Okay, so I've got my second layer down. Now I go to my darkest color, which is 054, and just in the shadow areas, and you can make them flick. Don't worry if you go over previous flicks. It will just make the grass look thicker. Okay, here in this area where I only have pencil down, same thing. Okay, and here around the sword hilt. Yes, long, short. If you want long blades, you make your strokes longer. If you want shorter blades, you make them shorter. The technique is the same, just the length of the stroke differs. Okay, now I go in with my lightest shade and only in the highlighted areas, so as not to make my shadow areas lighter. Okay, and again with the watercolor marker, and the Q-tip. Okay, and again, very lightly with the tip of the marker, just add some strokes. Again, various directions, and smudge them out with really just the tip. And only make sure to keep your shadow areas and your highlights. And here in the area where I only put pencil. Here too. Okay, you can go around the stone. Okay, and once it's to your satisfaction, oh, I see one area where I could put more. Here, for example, it's an area I skipped. Okay, and smudge. Okay, and then again, we have our acrylic markers, and we put in our clusters of wildflowers. You can use fewer, you can use more. It's all up to you. You put them in where you feel it will do the most good for your page. And this technique can be done on any page. Okay, and last but not least, we have our muted green for these areas. And you just flick into the area you colored already. Here it's not colored, but you can see how it goes into the area that you've colored. Let me show you again the area that I completed here. So I covered over those flicks into the colored area. Okay, let's zoom out so we can get a better look at the entire effect. So here you can see the difference between an area that I've done all the layering and an area that is empty. Okay, and this is the technique. It can be used on any page. As I said, you can use any pencil, any marker, any watercolor. You can use Inktense. You can even use watercolor from a pan to do the base layer, which is what I did here. So here in the Fragile World page, let me zoom out so you can see the whole effect. So on this page, the base layer for the grass is regular watercolor from a pan, okay? Again, make sure that you let it dry completely before you put any pencils or markers on top, because if it's not dry, then the pencil is going to smudge and you're not going to get the sharper blades of grass. So it must be completely dry. Okay, so I hope you found this tutorial helpful. It would be wonderful if you like this video, and if you're enjoying the channel, please subscribe so that you can get other useful tips and tricks. Okay, so I hope to see you soon. Bye.